Welcome, all you sinners and sodomites, to episode 39 of Bible Stories for Atheists. I am Josh.
I'm Linz.
And we are your guides to the gracefully gruesome stories, literally, literarily littering the Bible. In this episode, we're digging into Esther, the book of Esther.
Digging into Esther.
We're digging into Esther.
Digging in right into her.
Right up to the hilts. And Esther.
Gross. That feels gross.
Most of the Bible feels gross.
The second of the lady books.
Yes.
And the last of the lady books.
Yes. Last
second
episode.
And the last.
Not last episode. Episode before last, we talked to Ruth.
That would have been fun.
Oh my God. We didn't even talk about this on the podcast, but we got my mom for Christmas. Basically, it's a Ouija board for Christians.
Yes.
It's a Holy Spirit board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the Holy Spirit board.
Oh
where
my
you're
God.
supposed to be able to talk to Jesus.
Yeah. By using this magical cross on this board that bears some resemblance to a Ouija board.
Imagine that.
Yeah. But you can find it on Amazon, and it looks like they're in on the joke, the folks who made this.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
So it's quite a good gift if you're looking for a late one for somebody who believes in God. Give them a clear, surefire way. Yeah, for an Easter present.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Throw it in the Easter basket.
Yeah. For a clear, surefire way of making sure that you're reaching out to the Lord, our Savior.
I have heard that the veil between the living world and Jesus is thinnest on Easter.
Yeah.
It's the best day to use the Holy Spirit board.
Right. There you go. Anyway, and if we were going to talk to Ruth, that would probably be the best way too, right? To do it through the Holy Spirit board.
Yes.
But so anyway, this time we're talking to Esther.
About Esther.
We're talking about Esther.
A much better written story than a lot of the stories in the Bible. And a female character in the Bible that has a little bit more depth than your normal female character, who is usually either super obedient or like the cause for problems.
Mm-hmm.
And she is kind of neither of those things.
It was pretty good. It was a pretty good story.
Yeah.
Relative to the rest of the Bible.
I'll give it a half of a thumb up.
A half of a thumb up?
Yeah, I can't give it a full
An amputated thumb up?
An amputated thumb up, yeah.
Just to remind you, we've got a voicemail that we set up. Feel free to call in. 1-616-320-4616. That's one way you can get in touch with us. We also have a subreddit, r/Bible Atheists. If you're looking for us on social media, that's where to go. You can contact us through a contact form on the website, bsfa.cc. So strap in, strap on for episode 39. Come on, pockets.
I need a little table by me.
You do?
Yeah.
She had another one of these.
I don't know. Literally like the world's smallest table, like enough to hold a glass.
Well, you do it right up there by the sugar skull.
Yeah. Well, and I can do it here too. There. But do you see what I have to do here? That's so much effort.
It's so tough being a white person.
Yours is right next to you. You don't get to tell me what's uncomfortable. It's fine. It'll be fine. Yeah. I know it's not a. It's
you put it on the shelf right there.
That is the same effort. I don't understand. You know
the floor.
Listen, you know how clumsy I am.
Yes.
Putting it. You want me to put a glass? I
know you're probably gonna hurt your foot somehow.
Or I'm gonna break one of these magnificent glasses.
Mm-hmm. So. Esther.
There's
a TH in there.
That is how you spell Esther.
Esther.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was fun.
Esther's a great name.
So, do you know anything about the book of Esther? Nothing.
Zero. Nothing. It's one of the two books named after a woman, which means it's probably not even about her.
It actually is quite a bit. Not only about her, but it is quite a bit. And she's actually again, I don't know if
feminist
I wouldn't say this is like a feminist story,
Ruth?
but I would say she's probably better than Ruth was.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Whose whole thing was like
finding a man.
Yeah. Being woman enough to get that man.
A true godly feminist.
Right. Yeah.
Who just knows that she needs a man.
Right.
Right.
Of course.
This is actually, the story is the basis for the Jewish festival of Purim. Purim is celebrated by giving each other gift baskets.
Ooh.
Which you would be great at.
I would.
You love throwing together a gift
do.
basket. Donating to charity specifically for the poor.
Oh.
Yeah. Eating a celebratory meal.
Oh my God.
Public recitation of the scroll of Esther.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then reciting additions to the daily prayers.
They had me up until that part, but then but I was like, this sounds like my kind of holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I believe it's a pretty big one for people who are Jewish. Like it's one of their bigger holidays. Like Hanukkah is not as big of a thing as most people think it is, because it's right around Christmas time. Everybody thinks, oh, Hanukkah is a huge thing, and it's not really that big for Jewish people.
Every day.
You do, but there's small stuff normally.
Yeah. Not if you watch like any of those MTV shows where they were having like spoiled girls receive presents.
Oh, right.
Like My Sweet 16 and shit like that.
Right.
I feel like there was lots of times where Hanukkah presents were like a car.
Oh, yeah.
And,
well, when you're rich, yeah.
Yeah.
Esther is one of only 2 books in the Bible that don't mention God at all.
Oh, yeah. You said that previously.
Yeah. Some believe this is intentional, and the writer's goal was to show how God works behind the scenes through coincidence and good luck.
Oh.
Yeah. And you'll be able to see it throughout the story, like where those parts are.
God works through coincidence and luck.
Right.
It sounds like just coincidence and luck.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like when you read through this, and who knows if it's different in the original Hebrew or anything, but like you read through this and it's like, I don't think that's what they were going for.
Are you meaning to say that what people assume are coincidence and luck is actually the work of God? Or are you saying that God is coincidentally lucky in providing these people what they need?
No, God is making stuff happen, but it looks like coincidence and luck.
Gotcha.
But it's actually God lining things up to happen correctly, to happen quote unquote correctly,
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other book, by the way, is Song of Songs. It's the only other book.
Song of Songs?
Yeah. I think it's also known as Song of Solomon, because Solomon in theory wrote it, but it's a book of love poetry. It's the only other book in the Bible that doesn't mention God.
That's the sexy one, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was the one that you weren't supposed to read when you were a kid and stuff like that.
Oh, why haven't we done that one yet?
We've talked about it, but I can't figure out how to turn that into an entertaining episode. It's not like it's good poetry, it's
not actually sexy.
It's like enjoy your woman's breasts and stuff. But it's not.
Maybe I should read that one.
It's not like there's a narrative to it or anything like that. So we could
just do the whole thing, and then after the end of each one, just do like a horny test.
A horny test?
Like, how horny are you now?
Give it a boner meter.
Yes! See, I've fixed your problem.
I give it 3 out of 4 tits.
So a pair and a half.
No, it should be like a boner angle. It's a 75 degree.
Whatever we figure out, man. Yeah. That's definitely a way to go at it. Or we could pair each. We're getting off track here, but we could pair each poem with like a porno.
With a porno?
Yeah.
Oh, that would take some time. I think there's a lot of poems, like individual poems.
Are there? Are there?
I think it's a lot of short ones, but I might be wrong.
I don't know if you know this, Josh.
There's a lot of pornos.
There's also a lot of porn.
That's
and
true.
A lot of short ones.
Yeah, there's probably almost as many pornos out there as there are poems in the Bible.
Like you said, porn owls.
Porn owls.
There's just as many porn owls out there as there are poems. I don't know what that means.
A porn owl.
I know. I can't even picture what that means.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I can picture it. I just
can you?
I can picture it.
You can picture a porn owl?
Yeah, I think it's one that like grabs your yappy dog and then fucks it.
Oh, whoa!
Like swoops down, grabs your yappy
I
dog.
thought you were gonna say grabs your dick.
Because it thinks it's a mouse.
Tries to swallow it whole.
Yeah.
Good thing there's no
Goddamn
bones.
porn owls. Got a real porn owl problem this time of year.
Anyway, back to Esther. Way off track there.
Esther is only 10 chapters long.
Okay.
Which is like, so the last one we read was Ruth, which is 4 chapters long, right? But this one's 10 chapters, but they're very short chapters. It's actually a pretty easy read, despite having all those weird things in the Bible that we normally have, where it's like, what the fuck? Why did they say this, or why did they do this and stuff? Like, despite having that stuff, it's actually one of the most satisfying narratives we've read so far.
Okay, cool.
So I really enjoyed actually reading this. It was a little Shakespearean even. Persia's Got Talent. And we start with this introduction. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes, and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink with no restrictions, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. Now, in theory, this is the Xerxes the Great, who fought the Spartans in the movie 300.
Yes.
And the graphic novel.
Yes, and just so everyone is aware, Frank Miller didn't just come up with that story out of his asshole. It's based on a true story. Right. So it makes sense that Xerxes would be the Persian emperor. Is that what they are there?
That's a good question. Essentially emperor.
Yeah.
Like,
sure
I don't know if that was
the
term. Yeah.
Right.
But essentially he did have an empire. Yeah. In fact, since you bring it up, Frank Miller, he wrote the original 300 graphic novel. He also wrote a prequel called Xerxes, The Fall of House. Did
you mistype it? Did you mistype a word?
Yeah, it's The Fall of the House.
Oh.
I didn't put in an E.
House?
I was like, I don't remember this word being hard. All right, it's called Xerxes, The Fall of the House of Darius and the Rise of Alexander. It's a great title. It's really rolls off the tongue. Apparently this actually has a story of how Xerxes became a god king, and it involves the story of Esther.
Okay.
So if this is the Xerxes the Great, and we don't know for a fact if it is, but a lot of people,
it's not a common name.
I think there's a few different kings this actually could have been, but basically most people think this was Xerxes the Great. If it was, then this story likely started around 483 or 482 BCE. And it concludes in March of 473 BC. So the story spans about 10 years.
Okay.
And so Xerxes wants to present Queen Vashti's beauty to all the people and sends his eunuchs to go get her, but she refuses to come and present herself.
I see. She's
and
probably on her period.
Whatever it is, we don't know.
Present my beauty while I'm bleeding out. And back then, it's not like she was freely running down the leg, I'm sure. I know it makes you uncomfortable to talk about this subject, but
I'm fine with it.
They didn't have modern feminine hygiene products back then, so women were just whatever, or sent off into the woods to fight the wolves, or
I think we
go
talked
sit in a
about this.
hole.
I think we talked about this previously. You just sat on a sheep, right?
Something, yeah.
for like a week.
Right.
Yeah. You just had sheep specifically for this.
Yes, they're all pink-hued.
So Xerxes wants to present the queen, but she doesn't. She refuses, and we're not told why. Xerxes asks these nobles what must be done to Vashti for disobeying his command.
Yeah.
Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord.
I hate it.
You hate it?
I hate it. I hate all the men in this story.
Yeah.
I hate them.
I mean, that's going to be true wherever we read from the Bible.
Listen, assuming that I'm right and she doesn't want to come out because, well, one, she's a person and not just a object to look at, but, you know, back in the day.
Right.
Also, again, she could literally just be bleeding down her leg.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, let's beat her or something.
Let's beat her.
Yeah, because she doesn't want to go show her fucking face to a bunch of people.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, though, that what they're afraid of is that other women will disobey as well.
Oh, I mean, that's certainly true.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. And for the record, we never do find out why Vashti doesn't want to come.
No.
To
I'm sure it's a completely
off.
Reasonable reason.
Might be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might be. We just don't know.
Listen.
Yeah.
It is. It's definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, a man probably wrote this story, so there's actually no thought into the reason why. They just needed this plot point.
She's just being disobedient.
Yeah, and they just needed this plot point of a disobedient woman.
Right. So then Memucan tells Xerxes to write into law that Vashti is to never be in the presence of Xerxes again, and her royal position will go to someone else. And we get this. Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands from the least to the greatest. That's the goal.
Do you think they're actually ordered in this way, like when they're in a room from the least to the greatest? Do you think the person who is the least knows that they are the least?
No, I don't think there's probably. I imagine they're talking about peasants all the way up to the nobles.
Yes, I completely understand what they're talking about. But do you think the person that is the least knows that they're at the bottom of that barrel?
I would imagine there's too many people.
You think so?
Yeah, it was not until the end of this that I realized, Citadel is probably where we get the term city.
Oh,
and so we're probably talking about a larger city.
Yeah,
here.
Sure,
So it's like I would imagine there's just a lot of people. You wouldn't know. So then, when Xerxes calms down, his attendants propose a Persia's Got Talent style dating competition.
Okay, that's fine.
Basically, they just round up all the beautiful women in the kingdom and add them to his harem.
Oh, and then he dates them all.
Yeah.
And then chooses one.
Right.
But after every show, at the end of every show, he has to hand out the roses. It's The Bachelor.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's totally The Bachelor.
It's not really how it goes, but yeah, we can think about it that way. And then the harem is overseen by a eunuch named Haggai, who comes up a couple times, and whoever pleases the king will be the queen. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Among those taken captive with Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther was also taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem.
So they gave her a name that wasn't her own.
Well, it was also her name. It was like a lot of people in the Bible, it sounds like she had 2 names.
Yes.
Yeah.
She had her original name and then her local edict name.
I guess. I don't know if Esther would have been Persian, a Persian
Her
name.
was
Hadassah.
Hadassah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
That
her
feels
Hebrew
like
name or if that's or if Esther is her Hebrew name. I just don't know.
Right. And it's hard to tell because Esther is often a name you hear in the Jewish community for women. But
it's because
is it because of this? So
is Moses, but Moses is Egyptian.
Right.
Is actually an Egyptian name.
Right.
Yeah. And then another thing that they bring up here, how Mordecai was carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. So a little bit of biblical history. The northern kingdom of Israel fell to the Assyrians about 100 years after that. The southern kingdom of Judah fell to the Babylonians. Yep. And then
Persia, hold on, I'm remembering
yes.
things. And then Persia took back that area from the Babylonians and gave it back to the Jewish people, right?
Right. If this did happen around 483 BCE, then Jewish people were allowed to go back to Jerusalem at this point. They would have given over Jerusalem back to Jewish people. They would have been working on rebuilding the temple and stuff like that. So,
Gotcha.
So Mordecai forbid Esther from revealing anything about her nationality or her family to anybody there.
Okay.
He would walk to the courtyard of the harem every day to check on her. So he was staying up speed with her and making sure she's okay.
How many times were you raped today?
Yeah.
Only 2.
It sounds like from reading this, it doesn't sound like they were getting, like we hear about the first time that she goes to him. So like they're literally just waiting.
Yeah, there's no other men that are in there taking their liberties.
No, they're all eunuchs. Yeah. Before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go there, and in the morning she would return to another part of the harem to the care of Shah-Shagaz, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. So that's how it generally worked.
Okay. Right. So they all had their turn.
They all had their turn like the first time, I guess. It's really interesting, the 12 months
of having to get ready to have sex with this dude.
Yeah.
Who by all means was probably not himself a looker.
Right. Which, like, obviously in reality, he probably would have been having sex with them, but that's not the impression you get from the story. It sounds like they don't really say that they have sex.
And like 6 months of oil. Like, I guess that's just hydrating the skin.
I guess.
And then 6 months of perfume and cosmetics. I would not have made it. I would have, like, tapped out with a migraine.
Like, why do you need that much time?
He wants his women to be soft and stinky. With makeup on?
Yeah.
I guess.
Right.
I don't
why do you need 6 months of cosmetics? Like, don't you just need that the morning of?
Yeah. I mean, if you're not doing your own, maybe it's like they have to take a bunch of YouTube tutorials on how to do their own makeup.
Yeah.
Because the other women are like, I'm not doing your makeup.
I need to figure out how to make this work with your face.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it's Esther's turn, she only takes what Haggai suggests. So like they said there, you could take whatever you want from the harem over to when you go to the king. Mm-hmm. They don't say what she brings, but she only brings what Haggai suggests, which is an interesting thing because it's like she made this ally, right?
The eunuch.
Yeah.
The harem manager.
Yeah. It's like they're just telling us, like, okay, she made an ally and she's listening to what her ally suggests.
Right.
Like she's listening to experts how to be successful in this place, right?
I mean, I guess if you're going to be doomed to being a concubine in this harem probably forever, you might as well try and work your way to the top, right?
Right. Yeah. And she's being smart about it, you know?
Such a feminist.
Right. Yeah. Knowing when to listen to men.
Well, a eunuch. I don't know. I don't know anything about the male biology. But if you're a eunuch, they cut off everything? Is that what it is? Or just the balls?
I think it probably depends on the culture.
I could Google this very easily and find out, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to remain ignorant to the fact. But if they cut off your balls, let's just say it's your balls.
Right.
They cut off your balls. Does that completely remove your sex drive?
In theory, yeah. I think that's what happens with bulls, right? When they do it with bulls.
Human men and bulls are the exact same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
I mean, it's not that far off. God figured out the right design and he just kind of stuck with it.
I see. So. I gotcha. All right.
We're also told her turn comes in the 10th month of the 7th year of Xerxes' reign. So it's been about 5 years now since Vashti.
Okay.
Then
what happened to Vashti? It's just
she's gone. Yeah.
Oh no.
Whatever happened to David Miscavige's wife?
Oh God.
Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Esther becomes queen of Persia.
Good job.
Yeah. Haggai must have knew just the right sex toys to bring with her.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think?
Maybe perfumes or something.
But let's think about this logically. Whatever was in there, he had purchased.
Haggai?
No, Xerxes. His money bought everything. So if they're not bringing him gifts, they're bringing him his own shit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think these women could be possibly bringing him from the harem?
All right.
Are they all sitting around crocheting? She's like, here's a hat I made. Yeah.
It's not even well done. It's her first thing.
And the next time she's like, here's some booties to match.
Booties.
And then the next time it's one of those nose covers when your nose gets cold.
Yeah. And he's just really into crochet. He's got a crochet fetish.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can see through it, but you're covered. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a dichotomy of clothing.
I can be repressed and sexually aroused at the same time.
I can be almost naked and look like a grandma.
Yeah. So Esther becomes queen. But then one day, Mordecai is sitting at the king's gate, and two of the king's officers guarding the doorway become angry.
He won't go away.
No, they become angry at the king.
Oh.
And conspire to assassinate the king. Now, again, we don't know why they're angry.
Union busting.
Yeah, it would be I really wish they included some of these details.
Right.
In my head, I was just picturing a couple of greeters at Walmart getting really pissed and trying to overthrow the Walton family.
Yeah. I would imagine that if you're guards at the gates of the palace, Xerxes trotted through on a horse, and they were like, "What's up, Xerxes?" And he spit on him.
Could have been. Yeah, you and really don't know.
He went back in and he's like, "They don't appreciate us."
Yeah. Maybe they were pissed about Vashti, Oh,
they were Team Vashti?
Maybe. Either way, Mordecai overhears this plot and tells Esther, who tells the king, and she gives credit to Mordecai for hearing about it.
As she should.
Yeah. And they investigate and find out he was right. So the officials were impaled on poles.
Ah.
And the whole story is recorded in their book of annals.
I love that word.
Which comes up later.
Good job, Mordecai.
Yeah.
Tattletaling.
So we covered chapters 1 and 2 so far, which sets the stage for the real story.
Oh.
And the key takeaways is that Esther and Mordecai were secretly Jews and have found themselves in the good graces of the king.
New listener, I think you guys are fucking awesome. I was raised Pentecostal in a really hyper-conservative kind of fashion, and it's absolutely hilarious to hear some of these Bible stories that were preached to me as this is the reason why the apocalypse is going to happen, broken down into goofy shit that I can laugh at. Thank you guys for doing what you do. Keep your heads up. Stay safe. Bye.
The irrational hatred of Haman West. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pur, that is the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. This requires a little bit of reading between the lines.
Okay.
First of all, I think Haman is getting promoted to take the place of those officials.
I thought they were guards.
They were guarding the king's gate. Yeah.
Okay. But they were not.
And I have no idea, but from the context of reading this, it sounds like that was a high-ranking thing.
Guarding the king's gate?
Yeah.
Over being like the person that manages your harem?
I guess.
I don't know. That one seems better.
I don't know.
I would rather be in charge of a harem than just standing outside. I mean, it is Persia. It's probably nice out a lot, right?
At least when you're in charge of the king's gate, you're not losing your balls, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's the other thing that surprises me, that he's so like quick to rage about something kind of stupid.
Xerxes is?
No, Haran isn't he the one that's mad? Haman. Haman.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He's mad.
He's the one that wants to kill all Jews, right?
Yeah. He does. He because of Mordecai.
Yeah,
yes.
because of one guy.
Right.
Who refuses to bow to him because Mordecai is Jewish, so he won't bow to anyone because you don't do that, right?
That's not necessarily the case. Actually, no.
No.
That's so no.
Well, what if the king
yet again? We don't know why Mordecai's not doing this.
I just assumed because he like considered himself as God King. Xerxes did, and anyone like, why would Mordecai kneel to them? Right. Anyway.
Also, I'll just point out, Xerxes never is like, I am a god king, or anything like that in this. That's
just from
300
from history,
right?
The historical text of Frank Miller.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's a eunuch. I just assume dudes keep all their rate. Isn't he?
No, Haman is not a eunuch.
I'm so lost.
You're thinking of Haggai, probably.
Well, then who the fuck's Haman?
We don't know. We're just getting introduced to him.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought it was the eunuch guy.
No. That's Haggai. That's that guy. I don't know if we're even coming back to him.
I was going to be very confused by his. So when I said he's the leader of the harem, and you said yes, what you meant was like not that guy, because that's who I was talking about.
Right. So yeah, anyway. I'm thinking Haman is taking the place of the officials who were imposed.
All right.
You know,
yes. Now that I understand it's not the eunuch, it makes more sense. Right. I was concerned that a guy without balls was that angry.
Right.
I just assume when
I mean, if you, I know you're not a guy, but if I was a guy without any balls,
yeah, but like
I would be pretty angry.
All of your rage is in there, though.
I bet I would find some.
If you remove them, then a lot of your irrational rage is taken away from you.
If you don't have any balls, you have some rational reasons for rage.
Yeah. Irrational rage has been removed.
Yeah. Anyway, so anyway, there's that. We're not told why Mordecai won't kneel.
Okay.
And we're not told when or why he shared that he was a Jew. We're also not told why Haman cares he's a Jew, but unfortunately history shows that some people don't need a reason to hate the Jews. Yeah. And then the last weird thing about this is that he cast a lot for which day he would kill all of the Jews instead of just planning the time based on like, opportunity.
Right.
So
everybody who's Jewish is going to know that on that day they're going to try and kill them.
Essentially, yeah.
So they have to flee, I would imagine.
Right, or something, yeah. And then the last thing about this is the term Purim comes from pur, which they said was the word for lot.
Yes.
So that's where we get the term Purim. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury. So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like their customs are different from those of all other people. Excuse is used a lot throughout history for persecuting the Jews.
Yeah.
As well as a lot of other people too. Like
sure.
that's a pretty blanket thing.
Well, I mean, differences are the number one reason for persecuting another people.
Right. So Haman sends out orders to all the governors and such within the kingdom to kill all the Jews, young and old, women and children, and plunder their goods on that specific day that the lot was cast for. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes.
Like Cinderella?
This was like a custom for mourning, though, is like putting on uncomfortable clothes like sackcloth or hair shirt, as came later, I think. And then rubbing ashes on your face to make you look withered and stuff.
All right.
But yeah, then going out wailing and crying and
listen,
that's how you would draw attention to your political cause.
I see. Okay, it's their form of protesting.
Probably in a way.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say that doesn't sound like it's solving any problems.
No, but most people say that about protesting.
That is true.
Too.
People do say that about protesting.
Yeah.
At least when you're protesting, it's like, hell no, we won't go, or
right.
Let's keep our schools gun free. And
that popular chant.
When you're walking around wailing, it's just
yeah.
Which seems less effective than just stating what you're actually there for.
Right. I think you concerned Frodo.
Oh yeah, it's okay, buddy. I'm not actually crying.
Esther hears about Mordecai and sends him clothes so he can enter the gates, but he refuses to wear them. So she sends a servant to find out why he's troubled. Mordecai lays it all out for the servant, and he brought the receipts. He even gives him the written order, how much money they were spending on it, all of it, right? He lays it all out, and he tells Esther to go to the king and beg for mercy for their people. There's a problem with that, though. Esther responds to Mordecai that she can't just appear before the king. If anyone appears before the king without being summoned, then they are, of course, put to death.
Oh.
Unless he decides to spare their life, right?
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I do hate it when people show up unannounced.
Right, yeah. I wish we could do that with when people come knocking on our doors.
Just put them to death?
Or, you can show mercy. I'm not saying we would do it to everybody or anything.
As much as I hate unannounced visitors, I don't know that I agree with you that death is the answer. we might differ there.
It's not death. It's the implication.
Oh, okay.
Of death. It's the threat of it.
Right.
That's all you need.
Oh, so you want to start answering the door with a shotgun?
Basically.
I see.
Yeah. That's how we stop getting Jehovah's Witnesses.
All you have to say to them is you've been disfellowshipped.
Yeah, no.
It's much easier.
No, what you say to them is that we were Jehovah's Witnesses, but we're Christian now, and that really pisses them off.
Oh, I see.
When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. She's going to try and do it, but she wants to shore up good juju
By not eating?
By not eating and
that
not
it?
having any of the Jews in the city eat for 3 days.
That's good.
That's
what
good.
if they have to fight? They're
Well-
not going to have any energy.
Well, you're talking about that order
Yeah.
that came through. That's happening on a specific day. That's a ways off still. So
Yeah, but what
That's
if
not
they
gonna-
decide to fight?
oh well, then they
I'm
shouldn't.
not talking about defending themselves.
Yeah.
I'm talking about let's do it.
Yeah, well, then they shouldn't. I mean, this is their best chance at like
Not
getting it
eating.
overthrown is her going to the king.
I see.
Right. So, and
She just wants to lose a couple pounds before she sees him.
it probably is, and she doesn't want to be alone in it.
Although
Yeah.
if the factual school book 300 by Frank Miller were true at all, then Xerxes enjoyed women of various sizes and
Oh,
beauty. Because some of them in that movie were not attractive.
Classically attractive.
Yeah, okay.
Well, some of them are straight up disfigured.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's what my meaning was.
Right. I
Everyone's
see.
beautiful, Josh, until
Yes.
somebody slices your face off.
No offense to any listeners who have had their face sliced off, but
It's not your fault.
no,
It's whoever sliced your faces off fault.
you're still beautiful on the inside.
Inside, yes.
Yeah. Next up,
It's like rain on a wedding day.
Wow.
on the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace, in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you." "If it pleases the king," replied Esther, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "Bring Haman at once," the king said, "so that we may do what Esther asks." So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, "Now, what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this: if the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." So
Well-
I invited you to this banquet so I can request you to come to tomorrow's banquet so I can tell you my request.
Sounded like they were already having a banquet that she was not invited to. He invited her to the banquet.
No, she invited him to the banquet. "If it pleases the king, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him."
Yeah, that's for tomorrow. Tomorrow's banquet, right?
No, that was this banquet.
Oh.
It's really, it really is this a thing where like she invited them to a banquet that she prepared for them. And then when he asked what her request is, she was like, "For you to come to tomorrow's banquet and I can tell you what my request is."
Seems shady.
I know, it's a weird thing.
I would be like, bitch, you get one banquet. One.
This is how it all started with Vashti.
One banquet.
Yeah. The word banquet is used 20 times throughout the book of Esther. It's used 24 times throughout the rest of the Bible.
Wow.
Yeah. So this book
They
is
have a
all
lot of
about banquets. Yeah.
That's where work gets done, it seems.
Yeah.
I do find it very savvy of Xerxes to only offer up to half of his kingdom.
Right. Yeah.
He hasn't gone so far to like want to give her the whole kingdom.
No. What this did remind me of, though, is when we covered the Gospels, there's the story of how John the Baptist came to lose his head. And in Mark 6, there's the story of King Herod throwing a banquet for his birthday.
Oh, and
Right.
his daughter, he asked
His niece/stepdaughter.
yes,
Yeah.
who he was also in love with, I think.
It's the implication.
Yeah.
She dances for him and he seems to really enjoy it.
Right.
And he says to her, whatever you ask, I will give you up to half my kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that was inspired by this story.
Gotcha.
You know,
And she asked for the head of John the Baptist.
or this was a thing that all fucking royalty said.
Well, they just knew
you know?
because, like, at some point in time in the past,
Yeah.
some king was like, I will give you all of my kingdom. And then she killed him and she was in charge
And
of
she
the
took
kingdom.
the kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gave it to me. You all heard it.
Yeah. And so they started hedging their bet up
Yeah.
to half.
Up to
the
half.
kingdom.
49%.
Yeah. I still will maintain a controlling share.
Yes.
Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai
Wow.
sitting at the king's gate. His wife, Zeresh, and all his friends said to him, have a pole set up, reaching to the height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up.
He's feeling real excited about everything except for the
For
Jew
that Jew
outside is
Mordecai.
bringing him down.
Yeah.
And so his whole family solution to that is like, well, yeah, just impale him first and
Yeah.
then go to dinner.
Don't just impale him. Set up a pole that's 50 cubits high. I don't know off the top of my head how much a cubit is. If I remember correctly, I can actually tell you. It's a forearm, if I remember correctly.
Well, that's not
That's 1 cubit is
a forearm.
is like a forearm.
Well, not
if I remember
everyone's
correctly.
forearms are the same size.
No, I mean this was not an exact thing.
A cubit is an ancient measure of length approximately equal to the length of a forearm.
Yeah.
It was typically about 18 inches or 44 centimeters.
Yeah.
Though there is a long cubit of about 21 inches or 52 centimeters. So if you're an exceptionally gangly person,
Right.
then you have long cubits, where I have little short Tyrannosaurus Rex arms. So
Right.
my cubit
You
would
have
be
like
very
8-inch
small.
cubits.
8 inches. Can you imagine how crazy I would look? It would
Especially
be-
like if you had full,
Yeah.
like whatever your upper arms
normal
are. Yeah.
size.
Yeah. So you have hot dogs for
Yeah.
forearms. So that's like, like 5 stories.
Right. He's going to
Almost.
impale somebody and then
Yeah.
just let the body kind of just like slide down.
Slowly slide down. That night, the king could not sleep. So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed 2 of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. And then just then, Haman shows up looking to ask the king to impale Mordecai on the pole, but it doesn't go as planned, as you can probably imagine.
Right.
Xerxes asks Haman what he should do if there was someone who he wanted to honor. And Haman obviously thinks Xerxes is referring to him. So he goes big with it. He goes, give the man one of the robes you've worn and one of the horses you've ridden, and have him led through the city on the horse and in the robes, while proclaiming, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. And Xerxes is like, that sounds great. Do exactly that for Mordecai, the Jew. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. So Haman does it.
What a coincidence.
Right. So Haman does it, leads Mordecai through the streets in the king's robes on the king's horse, proclaiming, this is what is done for the man that the king delights to honor. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief, and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. More of that Bible stuff where it's like obvious propaganda of like, oh, he's Jewish, you can't stand against him, which they knew this beforehand and didn't have any problem with it. Yeah.
Well, now it has the added weight of him being somebody honored by the king.
Right.
I feel like Haman and Mordecai have a real Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner situation going on here.
Yeah. He really is like, that's kind of the arc for Haman is he gets fixated on Mordecai. Mordecai becomes his white whale.
His Moby Dick.
Yeah. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet, and as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered him, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. That's right. This isn't some small thing like being sold into slavery. This is serious.
It's death.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't bother you with the trivialities of, slavery.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting how she drew the line there.
Yeah, she wouldn't bother him. Then she'd just come off naggy. But why are all my people enslaved? All right.
Women.
Can we do this whole bachelor thing again? I don't like this one anymore.
Line them all up again.
Okay.
Time for another 12 months of oil and cosmetics. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he? The man who dared to do such a thing. Esther said, an adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage. He left his wine and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, a pole reaching to the height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, impale him on it. So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Isn't it ironic?
Whoa.
Yeah.
That was a real bad turn of events for that guy.
Yeah.
He deserved, he deserved it.
Like I said, it's a more satisfying narrative.
Yeah. One dude pissed him off and he decided to slaughter a whole people.
Yeah.
But instead, he got impaled on his own impaling pole.
Impaling pole.
Impaling pole.
And it's not going to be just him either. So,
is there going to be a stack of bodies like they're making hero meat.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we've dealt with Haman, but
Who else?
well, not only that, but the order still is standing, right? This
Oh.
order is still out there. So now we got to deal with how do you handle that order,
Okay.
right? So that's what the rest of this story is going to be
I mean,
about.
I feel like that. I don't want to jump ahead of the story, but I feel like that's a pretty easy problem to solve.
You would think so, but you're going to see it's not.
Okay.
Our children are the legacy we leave behind.
Unless they end up one of those letter people.
Public schools today are rife with dangers to good Christian children, from the heroin dispensers in the bathrooms to the sex stalls in the bathrooms.
From the all-night abortion stands in the parking lot to satanic prayer around the stripper pole day.
It has never been more important to safeguard our children from reality.
And they don't let you just lock them up in the basement anymore.
Because of the woke liberati, children as young as 8 years old are learning science.
You can't spell seance without science.
But you won't have to worry about that at the New Apostle and Discipleship School.
At NADS, your child will learn the ultimate technology, praying in the spirit.
We don't want to brainwash your children. That's your job. That's why we guarantee each class is as short as legally allowable under state law.
And each teacher is paid in coupons.
Your child can excel in all the classes they would need to succeed in life, from football to advanced football.
Where the sex ed class stops at holding hands and the history class starts 6,000 years ago.
And if you sign up for the gold package, your child will be enrolled in classes such as actual math, inherited wealth management, and Supreme Court Justice Prep 101.
What a great way to stick it to those parents who can only afford the frankincense and myrrh packages.
Yes, and for those God deemed unworthy of happiness, your child can enjoy classes such as math with sticks, toilet paper repair, and U.S. Congress Prep 101.
Use promo code BSFA at checkout to get 10% more math sticks.
NADS is only available in the continental United States, the only country where parents actively make their children dumber and call it love. The reason for the season. So that day, Xerxes gives Esther Haman's estate, which she regifts to Mordecai. Xerxes had given Haman his signet ring, and Xerxes gives that to Mordecai as well. Esther pleads with the king again to stop the plan to kill the Jews. He tells Esther and Mordecai to write up a new decree and use the signet to seal it. So we'll hear what this new decree is. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So instead of overruling, and instead of like revoking that
Right.
order, they set up a new order to say you can defend yourself, kind of let these people come out of the woodwork and kill them. I'm also kind of curious if there's like this unsaid thing here where you can't actually revoke a king's decree. Like the king himself even can't revoke a decree that
Well,
he
that
has
seems
made.
stupid.
It seems like it, but maybe
Kings are too-
it's just a narrative thing for
Yeah.
the story. But
I
yeah.
mean, the king is a guy who doesn't seem to be beholden to any sort of like historical law.
Yeah.
I think he's just at his own whims.
Yeah.
So 100%, I believe they could have just written a note that said, "Oh, by the way, we're not killing the Jews anymore."
Right.
But instead, they were like, "Oh no, we're still going to let them kill the Jews."
Try to.
Try to.
Try to.
But now the Jews can rise up. So one could assume that they weren't allowed to. They just had to be killed before?
I think so. I
you
think
weren't
so.
allowed to protect yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been like sending out the cops to kill people, essentially, or the military to kill
Right.
people. And
Yeah.
it's like,
But
you're not allowed
people
to.
still protect themselves against the military.
Yeah, they do. But technically speaking, you wouldn't be allowed to, it's
Right.
But,
I guess. I don't know.
When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. It's a weird last line, isn't it?
It is. They became Jews because they were afraid of the Jews because the Jews were allowed to rise up.
I guess, yeah.
So they were afraid of them.
Yeah.
I guess if the idea was like, if you're not Jewish, we don't know your feelings towards us, so we're going to err on the side of caution and
Kill you?
defend ourselves against you.
I guess. I don't know.
So people were like, "No, I'm Jewish."
Yeah, much like a U.S. congressperson that's refusing to step down right now is that George Santos
Oh,
guy.
yes.
Claimed when he was running that he was Jewish.
Right.
And when
He's
confronted
not.
about the fact that he's not Jewish, he was like, "Well, I'm Jewish." He actually used that
he
line.
said that?
Yeah.
That's fucking awful.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that weird line. But then there's kind of a reason to it because they get into overkill territory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the governors and the king's administrators helped the Jews, because fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased with those who hated them, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. The number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done to the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? It will also be granted." "If it pleases the king," Esther answered, "give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be impaled on poles." So the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they impaled the 10 sons of Haman. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they put to death in Susa 300 men, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. So basically, Jews outside of the city had the 13th day to kill their enemies, and the Jews in the city had an extra day. And there's this whole thing in Purim about how in certain cities it's celebrated on what would be the 14th day, and then everywhere else it's the day before is when Purim is actually celebrated.
I see. Do you imagine being one of those 10 kids, 10 sons, and being the one that like hated your dad?
Right.
And now in his death, he's even pissing you off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole time they're dragging you away, they're like, "I hated that motherfucker.
Yeah.
Don't do this.
I want to be Jewish."
Every night I would trim off a little bit of my pubic hair and put it in his mouth. I'm one of you, I promise.
Is this how you rebelled against your parents?
No. I'm not a dude, though.
Right. That's true. That's a total dude thing. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. Because of everything written in this letter and because of what they had seen and what had happened to them, the Jews took it on themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants and all who join them should without fail observe these 2 days every year in the way prescribed and at the time appointed. These days should be remembered and observed in every generation by every family, and in every province and in every city. And these days of Purim should never fail to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory of these days die out among their descendants. And that brings us up to chapter 10, which is literally just a paragraph long. And this is the end of it. Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and held in high esteem by many of his fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. It's weird how the book of Esther at the end of it is all about Mordecai. Yeah.
Is it funny?
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Right.
I mean, it was a good story, right? In terms of the
Relative to the
stories.
rest of the Bible.
Yeah,
This was like a pretty solid one.
It had
yeah.
a good turn in the middle there with a character that just came out of nowhere. And I guess that's fine because you didn't get to hang around with him for too long before he got himself impaled on his own impaling pole. I don't know that it's a feminist tale.
Well, no, I don't think it is.
I could see where, like, if you're coming at feminism from a way of like she didn't have a complete lack of power in her relationship, I would say maybe, but I don't even buy that to be true.
She used the power she had to help her people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that just makes her more of a good person.
Right.
Than a feminist.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting how she took only what Haggai had suggested and stuff like that, like and coming up with the idea of, all right, we're gonna fast for 3 days, we're gonna try and like shore up good juju and everything,
right? And
then I'm gonna do this whole banquet thing,
to
get the king in good spirits and be on his good side and stuff.
Right.
It just showed a like more critical thinking and more creative thinking than you normally get from women characters in the Bible.
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair. They did give her more of a personality.
Yeah.
I guess.
Right.
And I guess in terms of the Bible, that I guess makes her a feminist icon.
Of all the women throughout here, yeah.
But also, I guess if you're thinking about it in terms of like Christian feminism, which seems not like a thing. If you're looking at Esther as a role model, I guess, and you're Christian, then the thing that you get from it is everything you should do should be for your people, but it has to go through your husband first.
Yeah.
And a feminist woman who is also Christian realizes that, but knows how to manipulate her husband into doing what she wants him to do. So it's about knowing your place, but also knowing how to manipulate. And I guess that, you gotta start somewhere.
Yeah.
Adding the layer of manipulation is, I guess, better than just complete misogyny.
And at least this time it's manipulation for a positive end,
right,
and not manipulation to get like Adam to eat the apple.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And okay, can we pull back on that? Because all Eve did was say, do you want to bite of this apple? That's not manipulation. That's a question. But
I really do think there are a lot of Christians out there that it's like, oh, Eve's manipulation, of Adam.
Right.
Adam wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for her,
Well, that's just saying that Adam is stupid.
Well, yeah. There's another interesting custom with Purim. They eat a pastry called a Haman Tashen, which translates to Haman's pockets.
Okay.
These are an Ashkenazi Jewish triangular filled pocket pastry. The traditional filling for these is mon, which is like poppy seed paste.
Okay.
But you can also find them in a bunch of other kinds of stuff like caramel, chocolate, cherries, figs, etc. These pastries are also known in Hebrew as Aznei Haman, meaning Haman's ears.
Ah.
So they have it's like a tradition that you're eating
his ears.
His ears. Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I do like that. Any reason to eat pastry.
Right. When I came across it before I even read the story, and I was like, oh God, do they cut off his ears and eat them or something? Like, and
that would be amazing.
I was a little disappointed that wasn't how the story ended.
Yeah.
But
you know how it came about at some point is somebody was making pastries for Purim.
Yeah.
And somebody was like, oh my gosh, those look like ears. And they're like, oh, let's pretend we're eating that fucker's ears.
Right. Yeah.
And then from that day forward, people were like, oh, those look good. What are those? And they're like, oh, they're what's his fuck's ears.
Yeah.
We're eating them because he's a fuck. You want some? Oh, you fuck yeah! I want to eat ears.
He had delicious ears.
Yum. Well, that was fun and short. I appreciate the shortness of it. Although it is quite upsetting that the only 2 books in the Bible that are women named are the shortest.
Yeah.
It seems.
Yeah. They're very short books. Yeah.
But I guess that makes sense because it does take women half the time to do anything a man would do.
Yeah. At least one of the best stories in this is one named for a woman.
Yes.
You got to take those wins where you can.
Yeah, I don't have to do anything, Joshua.
Hey folks, Linz and I recorded a whole extra section to this episode, and we're not going to use it. We got a message on our subreddit, r/Bible Atheist, by a user named Cult Washed My Brain, which is one of the coolest usernames I've ever seen. And they asked about my deconversion story, how I lost my religion, right? And we talked about that a few times in previous episodes, but I thought it would be interesting to really do a deep dive into it. And we were trying to do that in this episode, but it was a little disorganized. So instead, we're going to dedicate an entire episode to it next episode. And we want to hear why you don't believe. You can give our voicemail a call at 1-616-320-4616. If there's a certain thing, a certain argument or fact that brought you out of religion or has kept you from religion, we want to know what that is. So let's say by January 22nd, 2023, if you could get your voicemails in by then, that gives me a little bit of time to edit and get it out before the next episode. So thank you very much for listening all the way to the end of the episode. They all lived miserably ever after. Thank you so much for checking out our podcast. Help us share the good news by sending this to a friend or leaving a review to help others find us. And if you want to support us with a donation, you can do that on our website at bsfa.cc.
Oh, just as an FYI, the etymology for the word city comes from Middle English, from Old French cité, and from Latin civitas, from civis, and from Proto-Indo European key. But that is also the etymology for the word citadel. So city doesn't come from the word citadel, but citadel and city, yes, they're cousins. Evolutionarily,
right.
They started from the same word, but they branched off.
If evolution's real, why does citadels never give birth to cities anymore?